So today I'm going to show you how to turn a t-shirt into a drawstring backpack. You're basically going to put the straight edge, or any other you can mark with a pen and cut with scissors, but I like to use my rotary cutter. You're going to just cut right through the top of the t-shirt to cut this bottom part, and it'll be sewn on up here. That'll give you a channel for the cord to go through. So the next thing you're going to do is cut the hem off along the bottom. Again, you can either draw a line and cut it with your scissors, or you can use the rotary. You're just going to take this ruler measurements don't have to be exact, but I like the bottom piece to be about 8 inches wide. So I'm going to line this up. I'm going to measure out 8 inches, and then I'm going to cut right through the t-shirt on the 8. And the next thing I'm going to cut is going to be the sides. We're going to cut the sleeves off. And you don't have to be super careful about measurements. You kind of can make it whatever size you want. And if you do this and then you think it looks too wide, you can always shorten it. So now that I have this almost square, I've noticed that the graphic not only wasn't centered left to right, but it looks like it's like slanted slightly. So when I cut the top of the shirt off, you can see how this is very uneven over here. So I'm just going to grab the ruler one more time, and I'm going to straighten out the top there. So we're going to be using grommets in the bottom corners for the drawstring to go through. And if you just put a grommet into the knit, because it stretches, is going to tear and pull away, and you're going to end up with a hole. So what we need to do now is reinforce the corners. So you're going to cut 3-inch squares out of a woven backing, something that won't stretch. And then this is a double-sided fusible, so it's sticky when you iron it on both sides. And you're going to take these 3-inch squares and cut them diagonally. And then using your iron on high, we're going to put these on the back of the fabric, back of the t-shirt fabric, and press them in place. And that's going to reinforce the corner so that when you put the grommet in, the fabric doesn't stretch and make a hole. So now I'm just going to take the iron. These are in place on the bottom corners. And you'll see that with that double-sided fusible there, the pieces are now stuck together, and that gives you the reinforcement that you need. Now that the corners are reinforced, you're going to put your right sides together, and you're going to stitch around the 3 sides of the t-shirt, leaving the top open. I'm going to use the serger. You can use a regular machine as well, but serger is easy. Okay, now that that's done, we're going to form the channel for the top. You want the top part, of course, to be as wide as the bottom is, so you're going to trim this piece so that it's the same measurement as your top. Okay, before I actually stitch this together, I'm going to mark where my fold is. And I want an opening of about 1 inch for the cord to go through. So I'm actually going to mark 1 inch down. And doing that, I'm going to mark 1 inch on this side as well. So here's where my fold is. Here's the 1 inch opening on this side, the 1 inch opening on the other. So I'm going to fold this over just under 3/8 of an inch because that's the seam allowance that my serger takes, and I do want the top and bottom to match up. And I'm going to stitch just from here to here along the opening. Pin. I'm stitching far enough in that I know I'm catching my fabric underneath. And then once that's sewn, you're going to do that to all 4 openings, 2 on each piece of fabric. And then what you'll need to do is once you've got that stitched, you're going to, right where the stitching ends, you're going to clip to the seam. The reason you do that is so that you can open your seam up to stitch. You can stop that. So now with your opening edges stitched down, you're going to take your 2 pieces with the right sides together, and you're going to close up this part of the seam. You're going to do the same thing on this side over here. Just going to close up that bottom part of the seam. You'll see the reason we did that is so that when you turn the fabric to the outside, this part of the fabric isn't going to flip to the outside when your drawstring pulls through. So our next step is going to be attaching the top of the backpack to the bottom. Okay. So here's your top piece that you've stitched along here with the 2 sides together. You're just going to fold that in half. You're going to line that up with your side seam. And you're going to pin that together. And I forgot my pins. I'm going to open my seam flat as I pin. I'm going to pin the sides first. It doesn't really matter whether the seam allowance inside the bag goes toward the front or the back. Once I've got the sides pinned, then I'll line up the edges in the front and back and pin those. Just make sure that you're catching both layers on the top part. So I'm going to sew this on my serger as well. If you were going to use the sewing machine to sew this, I would recommend stitching your main stitch and then coming back and doing an overedge stitch or a second set of stitching closer to the ends just to keep the pieces together and give a little bit of extra reinforcement. So I'm going to come along and I'm going to stitch right here. I'm going to stitch through the seam on the back and into the front. you'll see that just helps stabilize. You can turn that off. Your last step for sewing is going to be to sew along the top edge 1 inch where this is, and that finishes off the channel for your drawstring. Your last step is going to be to set your grommets. I'm using a Grommet Kit from Coghlan's. You can just follow the directions for whichever Grommet Kit you have. Okay, so I'm going to mark where I want the center of my grommet. You can kind of see where that diagonal piece is inside of here. You want to make sure that your grommet is going to be inside that piece. I've got my wooden block here, the metal punch that does not work, and I'll show you what I'm going to do with that in a minute. I don't have a rubber mallet, so I just hit it with a regular old hammer. And then you can see how that did not cut through anything. So what I do is just make a small snip. There you go. You can get inside, just make a little X mark right to the edges, or almost to the edges of where that circle is. It doesn't matter if it's not really circular, just don't go outside those edges. Okay. There we go. Set this into place here. Washer over the top. And ringing in my ears. And there you've got your grommet for the drawstring to go through. You'll do the same thing on the other side. So here's a tip for marking the other side. You can line everything up and go right through the center of your grommet. You can also measure, but sometimes it's easiest to just mark it like that. Okay. For your last step, you're going to thread the cord through. You're going to want a synthetic cord, a nylon, or a polypropylene so that you can heat seal the ends. Basically all that's doing is just melting the edges together a little bit so that they don't unravel. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take that and thread through. This cord is a little bit narrow. I could have gone slightly bigger based on this grommet size, so you'll just want to pay attention to what size grommet you're ordering. And then I'm going to take a safety pin and go through a couple times just because the cord is thin. You're going to go all the way through the front and the back channel and then come back around. You want your cord to be a minimum of 2 yards long, maximum of about 2.5 yards, and you're going to need 2 pieces. So you'll need a total of 4 to 5 yards of cord. And once you've come through the front, you're going to go through the back as well. There you go. And then you're going to knot your ends together. You can also, in order to keep the knot from coming undone, fuse the ends of the knot together a little bit as well. So you could take your same matches or lighter or whatever. Once you've got your, there we go. Once you've got your knot tied, you can, okay, I'm going to thread the other side. Where you fed this side through this grommet and this side, you're feeding through this grommet, this side, and then all the way around. All right, both sides are threaded through, and there you have it. There is your drawstring backpack made out of a t-shirt. Ta-da!